Coming soon to Cartoon Network and Max is Jade Armor, a new European superhero cartoon awash in mystic girl power. But can it power through and prove itself in a kind of show that has long been doubted? I'm Benzie Johnson Jr., I'm enthusiastic about television, and let's suit up for another review. Jade Armor arrives into kids' TV at a very interesting time, where a few key dynamics are in play that will come to impact the show's potential success. But first, a little about it. It's an upcoming new animated series, well, upcoming for the US at least, hailing from Parisian producers Team TO. A co-production between France Télévisions and Germany's Super RTL, the show began making the rounds internationally right at the end of 2022 and into the start of 2023. Super RTL, and Australia's ABC Me, began airing it in late 2022, I don't really have a firm date for either of them, and France 4 premiered it on January 7th. The series is picked up by Cartoon Network in the US and Latin America in February 2021, with hopes at that time for a premiere in early 2022, though that obviously hasn't come to pass. It's yet to air anywhere in this hemisphere at the time of writing, though it has popped up on the lineup of Cartoon Network UK around the start of the new year as well. The show centers around a teenage girl who stumbles into being a hero when she finds out she's the last in a long line of strong, powerful women, and thus given the title mystical suit and the responsibility to protect her town from evil villains, all while tackling the normal challenges of being a teen to boot. The show's been in development since at least 2016, and originally featured a male lead before that role was recast with a strong female character. The show also features an all-female creative team, which some more unscrupulous online critics will almost certainly use against them if this show is bad. Personally, I generally have no reasons to doubt European cartoons, and both France TV and Super RTL have had their hands in some of the continent's most notable recent products, as well as one of Team TO's other shows, Mighty Mike, which was co-produced by seemingly every major non-American country on Earth. That said, this comes into Cartoon Network's fold at a challenging time for them, as they look for redemption and an expansion of their target audience after years of disrepair. Not to mention the burning of any goodwill they still had with some atrocious treatment last summer of their current and past content and the people who helped make it. Making this an even riskier show to pick up is the preconceptions and perceptions which surround the idea of a strong female lead. Even casting aside the controversial statements CN executives made last year about how girls grow out of animation, kids' TV shows which appeal to girls and girl-skewing demographics have had a hard time finding success in the US, as gender-neutral or boy-leaning fare has typically been seen as more marketable to broader audiences. There's a stigma, probably partly rooted in societal gender roles and toxic masculinity, which suggests that boys just don't watch girl-skewing concepts, and many of the ones that do have stereotypically become objects of belittlement, which isn't great for the boys or the series in question. Any LGBT+ related insinuations about the stigma, while they do exist, I am not qualified to comment on. By contrast, girls are encouraged to not have those sorts of hang-ups about series with gender-neutral or boy-leaning biases, making any reverse case moot. Sociology aside, the stereotypes have been proven by viewership. Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon have trot out a number of shows over the past several years which overtly lean towards a girly appeal, and many of them have been doomed to ratings failures in short series runs. Disney Channel has had a better go of things, but only because they went all in on the demographic, for better or worse, and built Disney XD into an exile for anything else, at least until that was good several years ago. The state of kids' TV for and involving girls is something that I feel deserves to be talked about, but I don't have time to get into it in this video. I'll touch on it more in a future video, so hit subscribe so you don't miss that. But all that aside, perhaps Jade Armor is different. Cartoon Network sure hopes so. Can this European cartoon beat the odds and defy perceptions? Let's hit play on this show's first episode and have a look for ourselves. And what an opening this show has. We enter in on a little bit of a trial by fire. I mean, how else do you describe suddenly finding yourself stuck on top of a clock tower? It's the birthday of our protagonist, Lan Jun, but time is going a bit wonky and she'll have to learn how to become Jade Armor to get things back on track. Along the way, we see a little of her family and friends, and, well, she has a bit of a rough day. I do appreciate the creative ways that the Time Warp plot premise wraps in with the new Jade starting to get the hang of her powers. It's clever in a way I haven't really seen before, even if there's a part of me that found it a bit too lengthy on my second watch through for this review. The second episode proves equally as important as the first, as here we see the flip side of the heroic situation, the reemergence of Jade Armor's foe, the Crimson Lord. The previous Jade defeated him, but his shards continue to cause chaos around town.
I've done it! With this, finally the mighty Crimson Lord may return to the physical realm, then... Oops! Oh no...
Yeah, this is gonna be a long journey for him. This klutz is the Crimson Lord's distant relative, and he's the only hope he's got if he wants to reform again. Today's shard of the day is in a broken mirror, and the hunt for the junk leads to Lan Jun beginning to grapple with her new identity, and the armor's legacy, an all-out chase to retrieve the shard, which leads to our first direct confrontation between these two sides. The one creative piece I liked about this episode was somewhat of a continuation of the trial by fire the first episode brought us. Specifically, we got to see what failure for Jade looks like. Even in this minor way that was presented here, a lot of superhero tales rely more on the specter of failure as creative impetus. Admittedly, often the stakes are pushed higher to insist that failure is not an option, but seeing the option, briefly, played out here is also refreshing. The first thing that strikes me about Jade Armor is the way it goes about its storytelling. The series takes a highly casual, almost slice-of-life approach towards its execution, which is quite novel for this kind of a show. There are strong narrative through lines present throughout each episode, but they remain largely self-contained still, in episodic tradition, a point of contrast from American fare which, especially as of late, has grown a tendency to become overwrought, potentially. In contrast to the bombast often given to the superhero trope, the show expresses itself introspectively more than anything. There's a sense of quiet as it walks through its plot beats. Perhaps it aligns with the early uncertainty the new Jade has in her role, which echoes through her train of thought and some of the similar storytelling cues throughout these early runs. The show is steeped in the Eastern influences which define some of its premise, but attempts to marry that high concept to a sense of modernity. Kung Fu, Feng Shui, and the traditional stylings of Jade's heroic attire are matched with boba tea and comic book shops. They don't come into conflict with each other at least, which is one plus in its corner. But while I respect those aspects, and even appreciate some of those creative commitments, Jade Armor also comes off as a show that seems too afraid to define itself. Its quiet nature is different, but I think it also makes it too reserved to rise to the challenge of being a superhero show. And on the flip side, the story outside of the heroics is too bland, too dry, and too sanitized, or at least too sanded down, to compensate for that. Everything works and nothing breaks, well, except for the bike in episode 1, but besides that bike, nothing is actually pushed to the point of breaking either. So the platitudes don't feel empty because the show doesn't feel solid enough in its identity for it to actually have anything to haul about. It's hard for me to tell if the show is well put together or if the show is so unaggressive that everything simply exists under a tenuous piece. We've seen much fuller sends on other shows, and honestly, it's perhaps a bit lackluster for foreign fare in that regard. Honestly, as much as I didn't really like it, Miraculous Tales of Ladybug and Cat Noir at least had a better initial idea of what it was and what it was trying to do than Jade Armor does here. The two do share some structural elements in their non-human advisory sidekicks and evil neutralizations, but that's where it ends, as the story and creative goals differ. Though, honestly, it had a better magical transformation sequence too. Jade's feels stiff, juddery, and not fluid at all, which adds to the feeling that it takes its sweet time to actually finish up. The show's characters are decent, but their development is nothing to write home about. Lan Jun's friend group brings something unique to the table from what little we see of them, but initially they aren't really characterized much beyond being Lan Jun's friends, which is a huge missed opportunity. Lan Jun's family structure is a bit non-traditional, but similarly, given how little exposition we get to them, they border on being typecast. We probably got more on Lan Jun's permanently disappeared mother in the 20 seconds we saw of her in episode 2 than we did of the people who are actually in her life. Crimson Lord's reliance on his otherwise lowly distant cousin adds something refreshing and creative to the incompetent henchman trope, which I like and I want to see more of. And honestly, I feel like all the exposition we got in the second episode was done far better than anything we saw in the first, which is a rough place to be. If anything, if we do have to settle for lackluster backstories somewhere, we should have the inverse. Have the core protagonist dynamics sold first. This show has a full 22 minutes to work with, yet I feel they have issues with using it well, which soured my first impressions of the show. Jade Armor has some work to do. Like many cartoon arc pickups as of recent, its beginning struggles to make a compelling case as to why you should watch it. In contrast to some of CN's other shows, where it's taken whole seasons to iron that out, and often the brink of cancellation, I have confidence she'll get on her feet relatively quickly. The show's creative storytelling feels held back by the conceptual cold feet we get from the show's mediocre execution, which drags down the whole show. And while these issues don't feel insurmountable, they will prove a challenge to overcome. The other challenge facing Jade Armor is its place in the current zeitgeist, and how it fares as a kids' TV series with a female lead. While I'm certainly not in the age range anymore, as nominally part of the boy demographic, and as such, someone who's been served by other superhero shows in the past, I feel I'm among the kind of audience that needs to be convinced to try this show. And honestly, I'm not convinced it succeeds on that front. Its quiet indecision serves to its detriment, not focused enough on the action to appeal on panache, but too little a story to engage on exposition. If Cartoon Arc just wants a show that might appeal directly to girls for the first time in at least a few years, that's fine, but I thought they were looking for a little more than that. And they should be, both to fulfill their stated strategy goals and because this is ultimately another weak and uninspiring show for their lineup. It could have bridged the divide and broken the mold of the girl show ghetto, but I'm not sure that this show even knows that that exists. I'd say it's a show that can't get out of its own way, but hasn't even committed to putting obstacles in its way for that argument to be accurate. It feels too safe to even challenge itself, so it's definitely not going to challenge any narratives about how we see girls doing kids' TV or international fare. And so, what does that make Jade Armor? A show that misses opportunities to make itself truly distinctive, for one, which is a shame, because it feels like it could get there, but for now, it doesn't do enough to prove its mettle. Make sure you hit subscribe for more reviews and all the latest from the world of television, and for a similar Cartoon Arc European co-production from a few years back, check out my review of Power Players up here or down in the description. You can support these videos further and get exclusive bonuses at benzie.tk/join. I'd really appreciate that. I'll see you next time.